على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم محمد وآل محمد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ألم نشرح لك صدرك ووضعنا عنك وزرك الذي أنقض ظهرك ورفعنا لك ذكرك فإن مع العسر يسرا إن مع العسر يسرا فإذا فرغت فانصب وإلى ربك فارغب صدق الله العلي العظيم وصدق الرسول الأمين سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين آمين آمين يا رب العالمين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اے کربلا میں حق سفیر و سلام لو، اے کربلا میں حق سفیر و سلام لو، اے بے کسو یتیم و اسیر و سلام لو، اے حامیان آل پیمبر تمہیں سلام، اے ناصران بے کس و مضطر تمہیں سلام، اے کربلا کے حمزہ و جعفر تمہیں سلام، اے پاسبان عطرت حیدر تمہیں سلام، اے کربلا میں حق سفیر و سلام لو، گھر بھر کے لاڈلے علی اکبر تمہیں سلام، اے فاطمہ کے لال کے دل بر تمہیں سلام، برچھی لگی ہے کیسی جگر پر تمہیں سلام، سونا پڑا ہے اب یہ بھرا گھر تمہیں سلام، اے کربلا میں حق سفیر و سلام لو، قاسم کی ہائے مرگ جوانی تمہیں سلام، خون میں بھری حسن کی نشانی تمہیں سلام، اے 3 دن کے تشنہ دہانی تمہیں سلام، شہزادہ بند ہو گیا پانی تمہیں سلام، اے کربلا میں حق سفیر و سلام لو، شیروں کے شیر ثانی حیدر تمہیں سلام، کیا تھی مجال روکتا لشکر تمہیں سلام، پانی کو تم نے مار دی ٹھوکر تمہیں سلام، بس لوٹ آئے مشک کو بھر کر تمہیں سلام، اے کربلا میں حق سفیر و سلام لو، اے فوج شیخ ننھے سپاہی تمہیں سلام، کیا خوب تھی تمہاری لڑائی تمہیں سلام، ایسی زباں لبوں پہ پھرائی تمہیں سلام، الٹا کے رکھ دی ساری خدائی تمہیں سلام، اے کربلا میں حق سفیر و سلام لو، تیروں سے چھلنی جسم مطہر تمہیں سلام، باقی نہیں لباس بدن پر تمہیں سلام، پامال لاش سبت پیمبر تمہیں سلام، نیزے پہ ورد کرتے ہوئے سر تمہیں سلام، اے کربلا میں حق کے سفیرو سلام لو، دکھ ہے سکینہ تم نے اٹھائے تمہیں سلام، بابا بھی لوٹ کر نہیں آئے تمہیں سلام، رخ سارے پر تماچے بھی کھائے تمہیں سلام، نازک سے کان خون میں نہائے تمہیں سلام، اے کربلا میں حق کے سفیرو سلام لو، اے بے کسو یتیم اسیرو سلام لو، اے بے کسو یتیم اسیرو سلام لو، صلوات
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد۔ سر زندہ کی دیواروں سے، سر زندہ کی دیواروں سے ٹکراتی ہے بابا، جب یاد سکینہ کو تیری آتی ہے بابا، جب یاد سکینہ کو تیری آتی ہے بابا، کانوں سے ٹپکتا ہے لہو شانوں پہ میرے، کانوں سے ٹپکتا ہے لہو شانوں پہ میرے، ظالم کی اذیت مجھے تڑپاتی ہے بابا، جب یاد سکینہ کو تیری آتی ہے بابا، مر جاؤں گی پیاسی نہ کبھی مانگوں گی پانی، مر جاؤں گی پیاسی نہ کبھی مانگوں گی پانی، اصغر کی مجھے پیاس جو یاد آتی ہے بابا، جب یاد سکینہ کو تیری آتی ہے بابا، جب تک تیرے سینے پہ نہ سو جائے سکینہ، جب تک تیرے سینے پہ نہ سو جائے سکینہ، زندہ میں اسے نیند، زندہ میں اسے نیند کہاں آتی ہے بابا، جب یاد سکینہ کو تیرے آتی ہے بابا، ہے کون میرے پاس جیوں کس کے سہارے، ہے کون میرے پاس جیوں کس کے سہارے، تنہا تنہائی میری موت بنی جاتی ہے بابا، جب یاد سکینہ کو تیری آتی ہے بابا۔ جلتے ہوئے خیموں کے نظارے ہے نظر میں، چلتے ہوئے خیموں کے نظارے ہے نظر میں، یہ بات خیالوں سے، یہ بات خیالوں سے کہاں جاتی ہے بابا، جب یاد سکینہ کو تیری آتی ہے بابا۔ یاد آتا ہے جب شمر ستم گر کے مظالم، یاد آتے ہیں جب شمر ستم گر کے مظالم، یہ نانی سی دختر تیری، یہ نانی سی دختر تیری گھبراتی ہے بابا، جب یاد سکینہ کو تیری آتی ہے بابا۔ دربار یزیدی میں بھلا کیسے میں جاؤں، دربار یزیدی میں بھلا کیسے میں جاؤں، ہے چاک گریباں، ہے چاک گریباں، آتی ہے بابا، جب یاد سکینہ کو تیری آتی ہے بابا۔
محمد وآل محمد صلوات۔ اور حبیب خدا ختم انبیاء بواد بلند صلوات۔ بر محمد وآل محمد صلوات۔ برائے خوشنودی امام زمانہ بلند تر صلوات۔
رحم الله من يقرأ سورة الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين صراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. الحمد لله رب العالمين، ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين، واللعنة على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله تعالى في محكم كتابه الحكيم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الصفا والمروة من شعائر الله، فمن حج البيت أو اعتمره فلا جناح عليه أن يطوف بهما، ومن تطوع خيرا فإن الله شاكر عليم. آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Second salawat for love of Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. And you're allowed a salawat for ta'ajil faraj sahib al-asri wa zaman. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. In the Ayam-e-Azah, it often happens that certain topics come up that we have curiosity about or have some level of unclarity, that it's a good opportunity to discuss and explain how it is that the culture of Azadari, the culture of this commemoration, has progressed to the point where we are today. And one of the reasons that this is an important discussion to have is the different way that education is done here in this country than it is in other countries. Let me explain. In the American education system, a child is always taught to ask the question, why? And if you understand the philosophy and the concept, then you can apply the principle anywhere you go in your life. So a child here learns to always ask the question, why? Until it comes to Islam. Because Islam, when we learned it from back home, it was always, I'll tell you what to do and listen to me. And do what I tell you to. Now, when a child comes from an entire environment where everything that is informational, everything that is part of education should be questioned why, and then they come to Islam and we don't answer their question why, they assume that Islam has no intellect behind it, that it has no thought process behind it. And this is a mistake. Islam has the most complete thought process behind it. Islam is the religion of the intellectual. So therefore, to think about, to address and to explain some of these questions in simple language, in simple format, so that our children can understand is one of the most important and valuable things that we can do for ourselves. So therefore, inshallah, between tonight and tomorrow night, there are some questions that I think are worth answering, that are good to discuss, and if we take the time to explain them, it makes it easier for us to answer the questions of our children and to be more confident in our iman. So with that, inshallah, we'll answer some of these questions in the next few nights. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Not long ago, a conversation began in the Urdu-speaking community about a statement that was made in one of these discussions or talk shows that exist in Pakistan and India, where the question was asked, are the Imams greater than the Anbiya? And this question became a very heated debate because it pointed to the difference in Aqeedah. The basic answer of this, the short answer of this, was that the Mu'mineen pointed back to a riwayah that's narrated from Sa'sa ibn Sohan and pointed to this riwayah and said that this proves to us that the A'immah and the Imams are greater than the Anbiya. Unfortunately, many people don't know who Sa'sa ibn Sohan is, and because on the basis of not knowing him, they question the authenticity of this hadith. Before we narrate the hadith, and then we'll go into an explanation of it, but before we go to that point, we'll mention Sa'sa ibn Sohan is one of the companions of Imam Ali who joined him in the battle of Jamal, Siffin, and Nahrawan, was one of the companions of Imam Ali who was one of the reliable companions. And in his attribute, our sixth Imam would say, Sa'sa'a was one of the few people who actually knew who is Amir al-Mu'mineen. Meaning it's a very unique status. Imam Ali would put him forward to go and speak to Muawiyah. When in the battle of Siffin, Muawiyah captures the water wells and prevents the followers of Imam Ali from accessing water in Siffin. The one who goes as the delegate of Imam Ali to go for the opening of those wells is this Sa'sa'a. Sa'sa and his brothers all fought for Imam Ali, and two of them were killed fighting for Imam Ali. Famously, when Imam Ali was struck by the sword, one of the last people to speak to Imam Ali was this Sa'sa. And on the 20th of Ramadan, if Allah gives me tawfiq in life, every year I recite this hadith on the 20th of Ramadan, because it points to when Amir al-Mu'mineen in his final moments said, ask me before you lose me. Saluni qabla an tafqiduni. In his final moments, Imam Ali again invited his companions to ask him. And Sa'sa'a was one of those companions who goes to see Imam Ali and asks him. He says, "Oh Amir al-Mu'mineen, I want to ask you and I want you to answer me." And Imam Ali says, "Ask me and I will answer you." And Sa'sa'a says, "Who is greater, you or Adam?" And Amir al-Mu'mineen says that while humility is a good thing, Allah also in the Quran says, وَأَمَّا بِنِعْمَةِ رَبِّكَ فَحَدِّثْ, that if Allah gives you bounties, then announce them. So Sa'sa'a, today I will answer your question. And Amir al-Mu'mineen then proceeds to say, Ya Sa'sa, I am better than Adam. Sa'sa asks, how? Imam Ali replies that Sa'sa, Adam was forbidden from eating from the fruit of the tree, which was wheat. Yet Adam ate. Allah never forbade me, yet Rasulullah and I have never eaten wheat in our life. Therefore, I am greater than Adam. He continues, he says, O Amir al-Mu'mineen, who is greater, you or Nuh? Amir al-Mu'mineen replies, I am greater than Nuh. How? Nuh preached to his people for 950 years, and because they abused him, Nuh prayed against his people. O Sa'sa'a, I tell you, this ummah has tortured me more than they tortured Nuh. Yet I never once prayed against this ummah that I am in charge of. Therefore, I am greater than Nuh. Sa'sa'a continues, he says, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, man afdal, who is greater, you or Ibrahim? He replies and he says, I am greater than Ibrahim. Sa'sa'a says, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, explain to me how. Amir al-Mu'mineen replies, did you not see in the Quran where we see Ibrahim speaking to Allah in Surah Baqarah, Rabbi arini kayfa tuhyi al-mawta. Ibrahim in the Quran asks Allah, oh Allah, show me, how do you bring something dead back to life? And Allah in the Quran asks, awala tu'min? Oh Ibrahim, do you not have faith in me? And Ibrahim replies, bala walakin liyatma'inna qalbi. It's from the Quran. He says, yes, but to give itminan to my heart. O Sa'sa'a, I, Ali ibn Abi Talib, swear to you that if Allah lifted all of the veils of creation from here until the end of creation, not 1 ounce in the itminan in the heart of Ali would change because of the certainty he has in Allah. Therefore, Ali is greater than Ibrahim. Sa'sa'a continues. He's asking about the ulul azm, the greatest of the anbiya. He says, who is greater, you or Musa? Replies, I am greater than Musa. Sa'sa'a asks, how? He says, oh Sa'sa'a, when Musa was sent to the court of Fir'aun, he asked for his brother to be sent with him, because Musa was afraid that he had killed one of the companions of Fir'aun, and that should they then exact some revenge from him, his brother should be there to support him. O Sa'sa'a, when Surah Al-Bara'ah was revealed and it was sent to the people of Mecca, I alone went to the people of Mecca, yet there was not a household in the city of Mecca where I had not killed one of their relatives. Musa was afraid by killing one. I killed in every house, yet I was not afraid. Therefore, I am better than Musa. Finally, he asks the question, he says, who is greater, you or Isa? He says, I am greater than Isa. He says, how? He says, when the time for the birth of Isa came, Jibreel came to the mother of Isa and said, oh Maryam, come out of this place. This is a place of ibadah, not of wilada. But when it came time for my birth, the Kaaba opened and my mother was told, oh Fatima, enter. This is the place where Ali will be born. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa. Meaning this hadith of Sa'sa'a is the one that is most often narrated when the question is raised that who is greater, the A'imma alayhimus salam or the Anbiya? And the answer is given through this hadith that if Amir al-Mu'mineen, the leader of the A'imma alayhimus salam, is afdal to all of the ulul azm, then the A'imma bear in general a superiority to the Anbiya. However, when we look and we see the discussion that where someone asks, oh Amir al-Mu'mineen, you announce your fadail. Earlier in his life he was asked, you announce your fadail are such. Rasulullah would announce your fadail. Where after the battle of Khaybar, Rasulullah says, oh Ali, if I was not worried that the people would treat you the way they treat Isa ibn Maryam, I would recite your characteristics in such a way that people would seek the cure of their sickness from the dust under your feet, oh Ali. So they would question Amir al-Mu'mineen, then do you imagine that you are equal to Rasulullah? And he himself would reply and say, Ana abdum min abid Rasulullah. I am but one slave from amongst the slaves of Rasulullah. The status of the A'imma was never something that exceeded the status of the Holy Prophet. But even amongst the Anbiya, to answer this question intellectually, let's say, for example, someone doesn't believe in the status of Sa'sa'a and says that Sa'sa'a's riwayah is da'if. No, it has come from authentic places, and we know the status of Sa'sa'a as being thiqa, as being authentic, being sahih, being supportive of Ahlul Bayt. Let's put his hadith to the side. We don't need one hadith to prove this concept that intellectually itself is satisfactory. To understand this and to answer this in an intellectual fashion, we would first have to go through and say, of the Anbiya, is there difference in status amongst the Anbiya themselves? And what is it that gives Anbiya their fadilat? The honor of the Nabi is that he is someone who receives wahi and communication from Allah. And that on this basis, he is someone who is unique in society, and then he becomes and is known as a ma'soom. He is someone who is ma'soom ismatil kubra. He possesses a mandatory isma that we can believe everything that he says. But amongst the Anbiya, 124,000 of these prophets, is there a difference amongst them themselves? And we would say yes. Al-Zahir, there are three categories. There is Anbiya, there is Rasul, and then there is Ulul Azm. That of the Anbiya, 313 were considered Rasul who received some scripture or Sahifa. And from amongst them are the Ulul Azm, which are of greatest in status amongst those people, amongst those prophets. Regardless of that, we see at certain points in the history of this world, there would be more than one Nabi present simultaneously, and one would be superior to the other. The example is given of Nabi Lut and Nabi Ibrahim, who were present at the same time. And Nabi Ibrahim was the higher of the Anbiya, and Nabi Lut was the lower. There is Nabi Musa and Nabi Shu'aib, who are present at the same point in time. And Musa is superior. He marries the daughter of Shu'aib, who is superior and present at that time. We see this description of having amongst the Anbiya that there were different categories that had existed amongst them. We go so far as to say that even the way that they received the wahi would be different as well too. Everybody's okay? I can explain. We have some time, right? Okay? All right. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Sallu ala Muhammad wa... Wahi, as it would be revealed to the Anbiya, would be revealed in 4 different formats depending upon the Prophet. Some would receive communication by Allah in their dreams. Some would receive communication through, for example, the Malaika coming, Jibreel coming and explaining to them. Some would then have the process of having direct communication with Allah, like Musa speaking to the burning bush. And that still there would be others who receive the wahi of Allah upon their heart. Amongst these 4, there is a difference in caliber. That 3 of them rely on the senses to interpret the wahi that is presented to them. If they hear it, if they see it in their dream, or they hear it from a third source, the sense interprets that conversation and then presents what it is that they understood. But then there's the 4th of these, which is where Allah reveals directly to the heart of the Nabi. And only certain Anbiya got this, including our Holy Prophet, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. This is where when we recite, Inna anzalnahu fi laylatil qadr. We sent down the entirety. Inzal, kalimatil inzal, fi'l al-inzal, when Allah uses it, is different than tanzil. Quran came in inzal and tanzil. Tanzil was that revelation that took 23 years of the Prophet slowly introducing the message to the people. But Allah says, along with this tanzil that Jibreel brought to our Holy Prophet, Allah described this as Inna anzalnahu. We sent the entirety of this Quran down upon the Holy Prophet in the night of Qadr, in one instance. This revelation to the Holy Prophet was a revelation that was made to his heart, not to his ears. Meaning the Prophet possessed the entirety of the Quran. Of the 4 of these formats, the afdaliyat of these formats is that when Allah reveals the knowledge to the heart of the Nabi. And the reason for that is the others require interpretation of the senses and require the limitation of one sense that then needs to be thought about and interpreted and presented. But the most complete knowledge that is received is that knowledge that is revealed to the heart of the Prophet that requires no translation of the senses. That requires no interpretation or opinion to be involved in it, but rather it is exactly as Allah intends. So even amongst the revelation that's given to the Anbiya, there is a difference amongst them. And that there is a superiority to some of the knowledge that is presented to them than other knowledge that is presented to them. Now when we've seen that there is superiority amongst the Anbiya, is it possible for someone to have more or to be higher than even the Anbiya? And how do we determine which Nabi is ranked where? To understand this, we look and we see that how are the Anbiya differentiated based upon the concept of their revelation and what they received in revelation. Meaning that the interpretation of status of Anbiya is based upon possession of ilm, knowledge. That those who possess a greater knowledge are of a higher ranking amongst the Anbiya. Hence, the one who received the most complete knowledge of Allah and of His scripture was none other than our Prophet Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Meaning there is no one who will disagree that our Prophet was higher in status than the rest of the Anbiya. So we see that amongst the Anbiya, before we solve this question of are the Aimma afdal to the Anbiya, the first thing we need to satisfy is our Prophet. The seal of messengership is the greatest of the Anbiya because of both the knowledge that he received and that it took 123,999 of Allah's representatives on this earth to prepare for the coming of Rasulullah. That they all prepared humanity to receive this one message, that upon this message Allah says, Al-yawma akmaltu lakum dinakum. I have perfected your religion. No Nabi prior to that had this status. So we see the status of Rasulullah, azim, greater than the Anbiya. Now the question comes, is it possible for someone to be greater than the Anbiya? Alal itlaq, in general. The answer to that is yes, and Allah gives the example in the Quran. When we go to Surah Kahf, there are 3 stories told in Surah Kahf, and we'll discuss this tomorrow, inshallah. But one of these stories is the discussion about Musa when he meets Khizr alayhi salam. One of the unique things that you'll see is Allah never mentions that Khizr was a Nabi. Allah never calls him a Nabi. To the extent where even in the Mufassirin there's a question, was Khizr a Nabi or not? The story of Khizr is very interesting, but it is not one of Nabuwwat. Yet we see that Allah gives Khizr a level of knowledge and insight that the Nabi of Allah does not possess. Musa is not a normal prophet. He's Ulul Azm. He's from the greatest of the Anbiya. Yet there are things that are outside of the knowledge of Musa that he needs Khizr to explain to him. And to the extent where he becomes ajiz, he becomes frustrated, but Khizr possesses the knowledge. Here Allah is explaining and showing that there is a class above the Anbiya of people who can be bestowed with knowledge that the Anbiya do not possess. Hence we see that Musa loses his patience in the process of following the example of Khizr, but Khizr's knowledge is complete of an issue. By this story alone, we can imagine and understand that it is possible for someone to be above the Anbiya in daraja of knowledge. Yet if you want to know, Khizr alayhi salam comes to ask his questions to Ali ibn al-Hussain Zainul Abidin. So how can it be? Salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So we can come to a variety of different ways of describing and showing that the Anbiya amongst themselves, if there are ranks, then there is a way of differentiating between the Anbiya. They are not one uniform group. And if there's differences in rank, then there's a criteria by which we can identify what is the status of each Nabi. And Allah describes the status in the Quran by giving us the story of Khizr and Musa to show that a Nabi can be someone whose knowledge is not complete in a matter, but that he refers to someone else for an answer and solution to that problem. Once we understand what the criteria is for differentiation and superiority, now we can go and ask the question, can there be someone superior to the Anbiya? Now understanding this, we come to the point that our Prophet is the most superior of all of the Anbiya and possesses the completion of the message. Therefore, his wasi, his wali, has to be able to support the entirety of the message of Rasulullah. His job is to preserve and protect that message from that day until the day of judgment. Meaning he has to possess that knowledge that the Nabi possesses. Otherwise, he is not an effective imam. He is not effective wasi. He cannot protect the message of Rasulullah without that knowledge. Which is why we would say the Aimma by necessity, by intellect, have to have sufficient knowledge for the entirety of the religion of Islam. Therefore, their knowledge can only be second to that of the knowledge of Rasulullah. And if it was less than that, that there was someone between them and Rasulullah, it would require for that one to be the Imam after the Prophet. They couldn't be the Imam because they don't have enough knowledge for it. There are 2 points. Do we have time? We have time? I haven't gotten to the other 2 questions. If we have time, I have 3 questions tonight. So we see in the Quran, we see Ibrahim saying, وَإِنَّا مِن شِيعَتِهِ لَإِبْرَاهِيمَ. This verse in the Quran is where Allah points out and says that certainly Ibrahim was amongst his Shia. This Ibrahim is an Imam. In his own right, he is an Imam. But here Allah is saying that this Imam is a Shia of someone. In Tafsir al-Burhan, which is a tafsir about the hadith that pertain to the verses of the Quran as explained by the Ahlul Bayt. The hadith points very clearly, and it says that when is this verse revealed? Is when Allah created Ibrahim. He removed from the eyes of Ibrahim the veil that he could see into the heavens and see some of Allah's creation. Where he looks into the creation, he says, I saw a nur that I have not seen anything like, that is the brightest thing in of all of Allah's creation. So he says, Ya Allah, what is this light? And Allah replies, this is the light of my beloved, my Habib, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Salli ala Muhammad. He says, next to it is another light that is less bright than this one, but is amazing. It is the most amazing thing in your creation that I can see. Allah replies and he says, this is the light of Ali ibn Abi Talib, my wali. Salli ala Muhammad. The hadith continues, then he says, next I see three lights that are the next greatest things in your creation. Ya Allah, what are these? And Jibreel replies, not Allah directly, but Jibreel replies, he says, oh Ibrahim, this is the nur of Fatima, Hassan and Hussain of the Ahl al-Kisa. Salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. He says, Ya Allah, after this are nine lights which are unique in their beauty amongst all of your creation. There is no nur like these. And the answer comes, these are the sons of Hussain, who are the A'immah after him. And the names of these A'immah are mentioned one by one, after which Ibrahim asks the question. He says, around them then I see lights that are beautiful in your creation. Ya Allah, of all of your creation, after these 14 lights, there are lights that I see surrounding them. And Jibreel answers, he says, these are the lights of the Shia of Ali ibn Abi Talib. Ya Ali, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. To which the reply of Ibrahim is, oh Allah, make me amongst the Shia of Ali ibn Abi Talib. Hence we see that Allah reveals in this verse, وَإِنَّا مِن شِيعَتِهِ لَإِبْرَاهِيمَ, that certainly from amongst his Shia was Ibrahim. And showing the status that the Anbiya wanted to be like the Shia, let alone the comparison to the A'immah themselves. Which is why in Kitab Basair al-Darajat, when it talks about how the A'immah receive their knowledge, that an Imam is being given knowledge by Allah. This Thursday night is a special night. The A'immah would say that on Thursday nights we are given the knowledge to proceed with answering all of the questions and meeting all of the needs of the mu'mineen every week. So the question was asked, Ya Ibn Rasulullah, how do you receive your knowledge? And it was explained that the Imam says that Allah places in our heart a light every week that answers the needs of the mu'mineen. So we would say the Imam's description of how he receives knowledge is a demonstration of that the most azim type of knowledge that can be given to even from amongst the Anbiya is the standard by which the A'immah alayhimus salam are given knowledge to be able to support the mu'mineen and answer their questions. That it is not that there is a book that they must read that would rely on the sense of sight, nor is it a kalam that they have to listen to that would rely on their sense of hearing. But rather all of the knowledge the A'immah possess is a nur that is placed in their heart, that it is direct in terms of receiving knowledge from Allah. Now, understanding this, there is no necessity of direct comparison to say that in a Nabi who receives wahi from Allah and receives a scripture and instruction from Allah, and an Imam who enforces the religion of Allah, they have different attributes that they each possess. We do not say that the attribute of Nabuwwat is worthless, na'uzubillah. No, it has a unique status, it has a special status, but it is not in comparison with the A'immah alayhimus salam. The responsibility the A'immah need to be able to execute on the basis of knowledge puts them in a rank above the rest of the Anbiya because of the need that they have to accomplish. And by the ranking of knowledge, we would say that this makes them superior in the aspect of knowledge as otherwise they could not be the A'immah of Rasulullah. But this question of, for example, superiority between two elements because they are different becomes common, which brings us to the second question of our discussion. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Is where people hear us discuss the fadail of Imam Hussain, the status of the Majlis of Imam Hussain. And na'uzubillah, they accuse us of believing the superiority of Imam Hussain over our Prophet. This is impossible. It is mahal. But it needs to be addressed. Why? Because we admit to and acknowledge that there are certain fadail, certain characteristics and attributes that Imam Hussain possesses that no one else possesses. When we read Ziyarat-i-Nahiya, it is the Imam of our time, Sahib al-Asri wal-Zaman, Salli ala Muhammad wa ali, who describes the fadail of Imam Hussain and says that Allah has given you three things that no one else has been given for the greatness of your sacrifice, Ya Aba Abdullah. Three things no one else has been given. One, he says that the other 9 Imam are from your lineage and from your children and offspring. All of the A'immah come from Imam Hussain. 2, the dua that is made under the dome of Imam Hussain is mustajab, it is answered. And that 3, that Allah has put a cure in the dirt of the grave of Imam Hussain. This third one is the one that becomes very complicated sometimes for people to believe and understand. Why? Because we are made of deen, we are made of clay. And for us to consume clay is haram, because that is what we are made of. To the extent where the A'immah would say if someone died of a disease from eating clay, we would not pray over them because of the severity of the punishment of that action. We would not accept them. In general, for you to pick up dirt or sand and put it in your mouth and eat it, haram. Not even makruh, not even mubah, haram. Yet the grave of Imam Hussain, to eat from that is not only allowed, but it is shifa'ah for every disease you have in your body. No other grave can we do this from. Now, it's not that you pick up like a spoonful and you eat. No, a lentil size that's mixed with water, and there's an etiquette to this of how to take from the dirt of the grave of Imam Hussain, how to use it as a cure, has an entire formula to it, has a prescription to it. But it's something that is a cure. And when we make a statement like this, sometimes the question is asked then, that says then, how can you who raised the grave of Abu Abdullah to this status, are you competing with the fadilat of Rasulullah? No, not at all. Not at all. Rather, the fadilat of Imam Hussain is on the basis of his connection to Rasulullah. And his fada'il are a light to the fada'il of our Prophet. When our Prophet made the statement, Husaynun minni wa ana min Hussain, is the explanation to say that if you want to reach Rasulullah, the fadilat of Abu Abdullah will lead you to Rasulullah, not any other way. When we describe these unique characteristics of Imam Hussain, they are not in competition with the Prophet. I'll give you an example. Everybody's good? I'm taking my time tonight. I'm enjoying speaking to you and explaining these points to you. And same thing, the answer is that when we talk about Abu Abdullah, and we'll get to, we do 10 majalis for Imam Hussain. We do 1 for Rasul. We'll talk about that. But the point is to understand that there's a thoughtfulness to where we came from and how we got to this point in time. So I'll give you an example. A shaheed has a unique status. A shaheed, if they die as a shaheed, no ghusl, no kafan, buried just like that. Does that make a shaheed afdal and greater than someone who dies and receives ghusl and kafan? No. Why? Hamza was the uncle of Rasulullah. Hamza died a shaheed. He died a shaheed, received no ghusl, no kafan. Rasulullah received ghusl and kafan. Does that make Hamza afdal to Rasulullah? No. His unique status because of his shahadat is that he received a special treatment and the ahkam for him were different. But it did not make him greater than the example of Rasulullah. In the same concept, Abu Abdullah is shaheed. He has a great status as a martyr, but it doesn't make him a'zam na'uzubillah than Rasulullah. Rasulullah's glory is by which that a shaheed is discussed and declared a shaheed because Rasulullah taught humanity how to sacrifice for Allah. You cannot be a shaheed if you do not have the example of Rasulullah in front of you to teach you and give us the ahkam by which we establish the exemplary status of one who is martyred in the way of Allah. The religion of Rasulullah is what taught us that when someone dies as a shaheed, they have no ghusl and kafan. Without Rasulullah, we would never know the tamiz and the difference between these two categories. So how can we say then that one who attains shahadat could be anything other than the servant of Rasulullah who established the example of the superiority of this person? There's no disagreement about this to say. Rather, what we say is that the nur of Ahlul Bayt emerges from the nur of Rasulullah. If there is beauty in their nur, it is because of their origin from Rasulullah that gave them this beauty. We never put the example that an imam could be afdal, which is why Amir al-Mu'mineen, the commander of the believers, says, I am but a slave of Rasulullah. The azamat of Rasulullah is something unique, is on the basis of which all of these imams receive their superior status in humanity. Had it not been for Rasulullah, we would never ever imagine that there is any value to any person. The only value a person possesses is their proximity to the Holy Prophet. So this is why we do not argue the point and say that no, we believe, na'uzubillah, we never believe anyone is a'adham to the Holy Prophet. Rather, any status that any imam has or any human being has is because of their following the teachings of Rasulullah, nothing else. In this, now the question that comes and sometimes is asked, then why do we hold 10 majalis for Aba Abdullah? And yet the majlis for the shahadat and the wafat of the Holy Prophet is one. This is to do with the culture of taking the opportunity to teach and to be able to establish the example of what it means to live like a Muslim. The example of Imam Hussain, and why? One of the philosophies behind the Holy Prophet's statement, Husainun minni wa ana min Hussain. Hussain is from me and I am from Hussain. That statement established one thing, that if you want to see what Imam Hussain does in relationship to Islam, Husainun minni, that whatever Imam Hussain does is what the Holy Prophet would have done himself. Wa ana min Hussain is that if you want to come back to seerah of Rasulullah, follow the example of hidayah of Rasulullah, you have to come through the door of Hussain ibn Ali alayhi salam. Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. This structure of thought tells us that there is the seerah that needs to be taught of how to live like what our Prophet wanted us to learn. The entire purpose when Rasulullah makes the statement and he says that I have been sent, إِنَّمَا بُعِثْتُ لِأُتَمِّمُ مَكَارِمَ الْأَخْلَاقِ, I have been sent to complete the perfect example of character in this world. If you want to see that example of character, the perfect demonstration of how in the most difficult of environments to establish the character of Rasulullah is the example of Imam Hussain. So when we analyze, we research, we study, we spend time to discuss the example of Aba Abdullah, it is to improve ourselves, and that's why we gather here, to improve ourselves in following the religion of Rasulullah. So through the majlis of Imam Hussain, we're not giving superiority. Rather, we're taking the practical example and presenting the analysis that each of us lives the better example of following that religion of Rasulullah that was sent on this earth to be the example for us until the Day of Judgment. It is literally what we call a madrasa. It is a school, it is a source of education. Not for a different example, but the example of Islam. So anyone who argues and says that you have reduced, na'uzubillah, the fadilat of Rasulullah, the simple answer is Rasulullah's own statement. Husaynun minni wa ana min Hussain. We will get nothing but the example of Rasulullah from the story of Imam Hussain. We will get nothing but the example of Rasulullah from the lessons lived in this life, and we will discuss nothing but that Quran and Hadith that the Prophet and the Ahlul Bayt preserved for us to reach to this point in time. There's no alternative message that we can preach. It has to come back to the Masdar. It has to come back to the Prophet. Nothing other than that. Which brings us to our third question. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Today the sha'air, the reminders of the event of Karbala and the event of Ashura and the sacrifice of Imam Hussain. Some accuse us that we have incorporated shirk, na'uzubillah, into these examples. I'll give you an example. that in the cultures that we came from, there are things that are similar to the way that we commemorate the sha'air of Imam Hussain. That they say, for example, people who see us when we respect an alam, say, you respect an alam. How is this different than the mushrik who respects, na'uzubillah, his idol? And they bring this example and they create tashbih, and they create a similitude between the idea of saying what we do and what they do is the same. This is not true. And it's important to understand how to answer this question, which is why that's the verse that we began our discussion with today, where Allah talks about the example of Safa and Marwa in the Holy Quran, in Surah Al-Baqarah, verse number 158. The verse that we began our discussion with, chapter 2, verse 158. Allah explains and He says, إِنَّ السَّفَا وَالْمَرْوَةَ مِنْ شَعَائِرِ اللَّهِ فَمَنْ حَجَّ الْبَيْتَ أَوْ اعْتُمَرَ فَلَا جُنَاهَ عَلَيْهِ أَنْ يَتَّوَّفَ بِهِمَا وَمَنْ تَتَوَّأَ خَيْرًا فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ شَاكِرٌ عَلِيمٌ. In this verse, Allah says that certainly Safa and Marwa are from amongst the sha'air or symbols appointed by Allah. So whoever makes Hajj or the pilgrimage or performs Umrah, there is no blame, la junaha alayhi. There is no blame on him to go around them both. And whoever obeys Allah, initiates good, then verily Allah is grateful, all-knowing. Why did Allah reveal this verse? Hajj is something that existed before the advent of Islam. From the time of Ibrahim until the time of the Prophet, Hajj existed. The mushrikeen, the pagans, used to perform Hajj as well too. But as we know, they used to keep their idols within the Kaaba. Along with their idols that were in the Kaaba that our Prophet destroyed, they used to keep one idol on the mountain of Safa and one idol on the mountain of Marwa. And as they would pass between these two, they would do ibadat of this idol, then go to the other side, do ibadat of this idol, and then pass back and forth between the two. When our Prophet came and established the example of Hajj, remember the Hajj, when it was initially performed, the mushrikeen still lived in the city of Makkah. So the people, when they would want to go and do this Safa and Marwa, they would come back and say, we don't do it. Because they have their idols on it. This is the action of the mushrikeen. What does this have to do with Allah? So Allah reveals the verse and He explains. He says, the mushrikeen do this action worshipping their idols. I have commanded you to do this action worshipping me, Allah. And if you do it when I command you to, then there is no harm in it. Meaning Allah is explaining the difference and saying, there may be something that a mushrik, a pagan does, but when you do it for me and your intention is ikhlasun niyat lillah, then there is no harm in performing that action. Allahu Akbar. Ya Rasulullah. Ya Ali. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Which is why a pagan may perform an action, worshipping that item, worshipping a false god through that item. It doesn't make our action the same as his, because our intention is proximity to Allah, and Allah welcomes that. That culture is allowed to exist. If we take things from our cultures that existed before and they came into Islam, as long as it's for the sake of Allah, there's no harm in it. Meaning this example that we give of the alam, for example. We don't kiss the alam because of the azamat of that piece of wood or that there is something false within it. Rather, that alam is a symbol for us that reminds us of the one who carried the alam. That our honor of this item is in honor of the personality, that if that Abbas was in front of us, how would we kiss him? How would we honor his dignity? And his dignity, as we explained in the examples before, is not outside of the dignity of Islam. Nor is it to raise him above Islam. Rather, it is to use him as a wasila to get closer to Allah. So therefore, there's no harm in this. And that the same way that those Muslims in the beginning of Islam, they had to be explained that the action may look the same as what the mushrikeen perform. When it is done for the sake of Allah and has a correct niyyah in it, it is something Allah wants and desires, not that Allah forbids and hates. In the same way, any of the items that we use in our aspect of commemoration, their sanctity, their holiness, only exists because of who they are connected to, not of their own element. Even this pulpit. This pulpit, we honor it, we give it dignity. Why? Because from it is the communication, the lessons of Islam, the way our Prophet used the pulpit. But look back into Sham. When my Imam is in the court of Yazid, he doesn't call it a pulpit. He says, can I climb that pile of wood that you have? Why? Because it was a false item at that time. It did not serve the message of Islam. Its value was exactly what it was made of, and it was a pile of wood. The same way, this libas, the cloth we use on the alam, is cloth. You can find it in the market. It's not expensive. It's not difficult to find. That cloth has no value. But when it is tied to the example of those who Allah loves, it becomes valuable. Otherwise, there's no significance to it. So what we say is that when this accusation is made against us is that no, none of these items have any sanctity outside of the sanctity that Allah presents to them, and that they remind us of those who earned favor with the status of Allah. This honor and dignity that we show to the alam is not something you and I initiated. Rather, go back after the event of Karbala, when the tabarrukat that had been looted from the qafila of Imam Hussain were taken in front of the Mal'oon Yazid, and they presented each of the tabarrukat that they had stolen. At one point in time, they presented before him what looked like the trunk of a tree that was marked with arrows and marked with the pocks of arrows and charred with fire. And Mal'oon Yazid looked at it and he says, why did you bring me this trunk of a tree? Why did you bring me this giant piece of wood? And they replied, oh, Amir Mal'oon, this is not the trunk of a tree, rather this is what remains of the alam of Abbas. He says, this was the flag that this standard bearer would carry of Hussain. I said, yes. He says, I see that it is burned and marked with arrows except for 2 places which are clean and fresh. Why is it that 2 places are clean and fresh on this and the rest of it is marked with arrows? They replied and said, oh Amir, those 2 places are where the hands of Abbas would be holding this alam. He did not let go of this alam until we cut away his hands away from him. He describes, they say that we heard the Amir in shock say he was that brave that when the rest of this was filled with arrows and was being burned, he still did not let go of this alam. I said, no, Amir, not until we cut his hands away from his body, and then this alam fell. When those tabarrukat were returned, each lady gathered from what had been looted from her and took back to herself, until eventually they brought this alam and they placed it on the floor in the middle of the women. Each woman gave up all of her tabarrukat, sat around this piece of wood and began to kiss the places of the hands of Abbas. They said, we saw that every lady's grief was forgotten when the grief of Abbas was brought in front. They forgot everything else and kissed the places of his hands and called out, oh Abbas, how you left us in difficulty. Oh Abbas, we called to you in Kufa and Sham, but you did not return. Every lady forgot her masa'ib and remembered the masa'ib of the leaving of Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas. You would see this happen in 2 conditions, that a lady forgot everything and paid attention to only one. One was when the alam of Abu al-Fadl was brought. The other you see when the heads of the shuhada were brought. Every lady went and collected the head of her shaheed. When the head of Imam Hussain came, Sayyidah Zainab went and collected it herself and began the majlis over Aba Abdullah. In the middle of all of this, the women of Sham were watching this event. They saw that 2 heads of young men were brought and no woman collected them. They questioned, were these orphans who fought for Hussain ibn Ali? Were these 2 young men, had they no mother that would cry over them? Was there no family? They describe and say that it was Fizza who steps forward and says, Hasha lillah, may Allah forgive. These are the sons of Sayyidah Zainab. She cries for her brother, but not for her sons. You would see that Sayyidah Zainab did not weep over her sons sacrificed in Karbala, not in the field of Karbala. When Abu Abdullah would bring back every shaheed, the first one who would be by that shaheed would be Sayyidah Zainab, giving comfort to that wife, to that mother, to that sister. My mother will accept this sacrifice from you. Be patient in the face of this difficulty. But when these Aun and Muhammad were brought in that moment, they describe and say that Abu Abdullah called out, where is my sister? Why did she not bid farewell to the children of her house? They said, Zainab is behind the tent, that she does not cry on these boys, that someone should lose hope in this effort of supporting you, Ya Abu Abdullah. Imam Hussain says, oh Zainab, bid farewell to your sons. She bids farewell to them and asks Allah to accept this sacrifice, and then does not shed a tear. In Sham, she did not shed any tears when the heads of those sons were returned. This Sayyidah wept never once over her child until she returns to the city of Medina. They describe and say she enters a quiet house, finds the room of her children, sits between their beds in that moment, and cries out and says, oh children, forgive your mother. She has never wept over you. Where did your mother leave you? Oh my children, why do I no longer hear the sound of your call? ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون رضا بقضائه وتسليما لأمره ندعوك باسمك العظيم الأعظم الأعز الأجل الأكرم. We raise our voices, we raise our hands 10 times. Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah. يا محمود بحق محمد يا أعلى بحق علي يا فاطر السماوات بحق فاطمة يا محسن بحق الحسن يا قديم الأحسان بحق الحسين. Oh Allah, accept this small ibadah from us. Ya Allah, give the thawab of this majlis to our marhumin, the marhumin of tonight's sponsors, and all those who are in need of dua. Ya Allah, keep our children on the upright path of Islam. Ya Allah, by the tears in our eyes, we have gathered here with hajat, fulfill our hajat. Those amongst our families, our community, the mu'mineen who are suffering through sickness and disease, give shafa'at to the mu'mineen wherever they are. Oh Allah, hasten the reappearance of Sahib al-Zaman. Make us and our families from the upright supporters of Sahib al-Zaman, and entitle us to the ziyarat of Abu Abdullah in this world and the shafa of Abu Abdullah in the hereafter. 1 Surah Fatiha, 3 times Surah Ikhlas, with your loudest of salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Bismillah. مات
नौक नज़र से देख लो बाबा अब वो सज्जाद ना रहा सज्जाद नौक नज़र से देख लो बाबा अब वो सज्जाद ना रहा सज्जाद इस घड़ी बेरदा हुई ज़ैनब इस घड़ी बेरदा हुई ज़ैनब करबला में ही मर गया सज्जाद नौक नज़र से देख लो बाबा अब वो सज्जाद ना सज्जाद क्या है पर्दा ये शाम वालों को तेरी दादी ने ही सिखाया है उन्हीं लोगों ने मेरी फुप्पियों को बेरदा शाम में फिराया है क्या गज़ब है के हाथ ہاتھ پھیلا کر مانگتا ہے بس کردہ سجاد نوک نیزہ سے دیکھ لو بابا اب وہ سجاد نہ رہا سجاد ننھے بچوں کے ہاتھ میں پتھر دیکھ کے مارا گیا سکینہ کو پشت ناکا سے بھی گرایا اور تازیانے لگے یتیمہ کو میں بندھے ہاتھ دیکھ کر رویا اس نے ہر درد پر کہا سجاد نوک نیزہ سے دیکھ لو بابا اب وہ سجاد نہ رہا سجاد اس طرح سے بندھے ہیں رسی سے ہاتھ میرے گلے یتیموں کے نہ جھکوں تو زمین سے بابا پاؤں اٹھتے ہیں ننھے بچوں کے بس رکوع میں ہی شکر کے سجدے کر کے گزرے گا اب تیرا سجاد نوک نیزہ سے دیکھ لو بابا اب وہ سجاد نہ رہا سجاد جس بہن نے ہمیشہ جینے کی ہائے عباس کو دعائیں دی بیردہ سر پہ رکھ کے ہاتھوں کو اس نے عباس کو صدائیں دی سرسنا سے وہاں گرا ان کا اور یہاں خاک بھر گرا سجاد نوک نیزہ سے دیکھ لو
یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین
وقت ماتم کا بھلا کیسے نکالے زینب بھائی کو روئے کے بچوں کو سنبھالے زینب بھائی کو روئے کے بچوں کو سنبھالے زینب بھائی کو روئے کے بچوں کو سنبھالے زینب اشک بن جاؤ تمہیں شام غریباں کے چراغ اشک بن جاؤ تمہیں شام
غریباں کے چراغ
رن میں اب ہو چکے سب اپنے اجالے زینب بھائی کو روئے کے بچوں کو سنبھالے زینب بھائی کو روئے کے بچوں کو سنبھالے زینب مجھ سے اب اٹھتی نہیں لاش جواں شہ نے کہا مجھ سے اب اٹھتی نہیں لاش جواں
شہ نے کہا
تو نے پالا ہے تو ہی آ کے اٹھا لے زینب بھائی کو روئے کے بچوں کو سنبھالے زینب بھائی کو روئے کے بچوں کو سنبھالے زینب چھینتے ہیں لئی کانوں سے سکینہ کے گوہر
لئی کانوں سے سکینہ کے گوہر
بڑھ کے عباس کو ساحل سے بلا لے زینب بھائی کو روئے کے بچوں کو سنبھالے زینب بھائی کو روئے کے بچوں کو سنبھالے زینب بھائی عباس نہیں قاسم و اکبر بھی نہیں بھائی عباس نہیں
قاسم و اکبر بھی نہیں
درد کس کس کا کلیجے میں چھپا لے زینب بھائی کو روئے کے بچوں کو سنبھالے زینب بھائی کو روئے کے بچوں کو سنبھالے زینب یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین
بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم
صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك يا أبا القاسم يا رسول الله المصطفى محمد بن عبد الله. السلام عليك يا أبا الحسن أمير المؤمنين المرتضى علي بن أبي طالب. السلام عليك يا فاطمة بنت محمد الزهراء سيدة النساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا أبا محمد حسن بن علي الناصح المجتبى. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله الحسين بن علي سيد الشهداء. السلام عليك يا أبا الفضل العباس بن أمير المؤمنين. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا أبا الحسن علي بن الحسين زين العابدين. السلام عليك يا أبا جعفر محمد بن علي الباقر. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله جعفر بن محمد الصادق. السلام عليك يا أبا الحسن موسى بن جعفر الكاظم. السلام عليك يا أبا الحسن علي بن موسى الرضا. السلام عليك يا أبا جعفر محمد بن علي التقي الجواد. السلام عليك يا أبا الحسن علي بن محمد أيها الهادي النقي. السلام عليك يا أبا محمد حسن بن علي الزكي العسكري. السلام عليك يا إمام صاحب العصر والزمان. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن. السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان. أجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله مخرجك. السلام عليك يا سيدي يا ابن رسول الله ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله